What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Movie Emporium's TV review of Westworld Season 4, Episode 1, titled The Auguries. This episode is directed by Richard J. Lewis. So after 2 years, a pandemic, and a bunch of crises and stuff like that have gone on in this world, we finally have the return of Westworld. We are now in the 4th season. We are now in Episode 1. And I couldn't be more excited, to be fairly honest. Yes, the 3rd season was a little bit of a letdown. It had some issues, especially near the end with the wars and stuff like that happened, the way it concluded, and just some of the things that were happening, the deaths of people and stuff like that, which you knew were going to come back. But it was just kind of an uneven season, to be fairly honest. So even with that said, I am still very intrigued by this series to see kind of where they're going to go. You know, that they moved past Westworld itself. They're moving into some very interesting sci-fi tropes and topics. And I was really interested to see what season 4 would bring. And now we have the first episode that has been released. But like a lot of the season premieres, especially with Westworld, the first episode is not going to give you every single character that you want. It's going to be a setup into a much bigger mystery, and it's going to have intrigue and interest, which is what every single episode of season premieres have done for Westworld. And this episode is no different because it deals with only like 3 of the major characters, I believe. 2 or 3 of the major characters, which include William, the Ed Harris character, Maeve, which is of course the Thandie Newton character, and of course we have Cristina, who is of course being played by Evan Rachel Wood, who of course played Dolores. But there's a much bigger mystery apparently happening. So why she's Cristina, who exactly this character is, why is she playing this character, is left up in the air, or at least for the first episode. But as I do with a lot of TV shows, breaking them down, episode by episode, I'll break down each character by character until they kind of eventually collapse into one another, as they usually do in these types of series. But this premiere opens up with, of course, a bunch of individuals that you don't really know much about. They're, from what you can gather, they own a bunch of land. They own the Hoover Dam. This is, many, many years after everything's kind of collapsed and whatnot. So they own all this property. And of course, William, the Man in Black played by Ed Harris, wants all this property. And he doesn't explain why, because you need these 8 or 9 episodes, however long the season is, to kind of unpack itself. So you have to leave something to the imagination for the time being. But basically, these individuals they own all this land. William wants all this land, and he offers to buy it from them, every single piece. Apparently they're using the Hoover Dam as a server farm for whatever reason. There is some things that are kind of thrown into the mix there with people that William knows, and why is the server thing in the Hoover Dam? It's not fully explained. But William offers the land, or offers to buy it, and they kind of laugh in his face. But William's like, you either sell it to me now, or I'm going to take it for you for free the next day. And basically what happens is, like, the main character we follow for those first few minutes walks back into his house, and he sees a bunch of flies and stuff like that. What exactly those flies are, I'm not entirely sure. I was looking up a little bit what the auguries, I think it is called, means. It has to do with like climate change, and doctors and scientists kind of looking into how the future, and how we look into the future and stuff like that when it comes to like ecosystems and stuff like that. So those flies could kind of lead into that. Westworld's always been about, ecological disasters, and kind of how the future, precedes itself, and the eventual, inventions of like androids, and how they become self-aware, and just how it, becomes kind of an eco change for the population that is, the way the world works. This being, 8 years after the riots and stuff like that. But of course, the man wakes up. At that point, I thought maybe he was turned into an android. It's not really specific. I think maybe those flies are maybe like controlling flies. It's not entirely sure. It's really kind of obtuse, which is what Westworld is known for doing a lot of times. But basically, he kills the old man. He kills all his people. And then William gets the property, like you said, for free, and then the guy kills himself. And that's when, it kind of leads into the mystery is, what is William doing? What exactly happened to him in the 8 years that have been since the riots and stuff like that? And what is his end game? William's always been one of those individuals that has an end game with like the circle, with the mace, circle thing, and then how he proceeds, and we saw what happened to him. So it's interesting to see how his character is going to play out, and it's literally like the last time you see him outside of like some vision stuff that happens in the episode. So But that leads into kind of, I'll leave Christina's stuff to the last because she is the next part of this episode. But Maeve is an individual that for the last 7 years, 8 years, or whatever, because like I said, this is, even though it's 2 years since we've seen the last episode, this series has jumped forward 8 years, and we see, of course, Maeve, who's living in a cabin, been living in a cabin for 7 years by herself. She's an individual that, somehow has the ability to, she sees her daughter, she's doing some meditation stuff, and she ends up blowing the transformer on everything, her cabin and stuff like that she's listening or living in. And she goes to town, and she realizes that some men have found her, some of the bad guys have found her, and so she goes and gets an axe out from her the local shop and stuff like that. It goes back to the cabin, kills all the men who have shotguns and stuff like that, have rifles, and then she kills the main bad guy. And he tells her that power outage that she had caused basically alerted certain individuals. And then when she cuts the head off the guy, we find out it's an android. She taps into the memory of this android and realizes that William has sent her, and this is the last time we ever see William in the episode. But basically, William has found her, found where she's living, and she decides to burn down the cabin. And it's really interesting to see once again, how powerful Maeve is. You actually forget, if it's been 2 years, so you kind of forget what happened, but it's really intriguing to see how Maeve is just so powerful and so good at what she does. She's now like a super badass with the axe and stuff like that. And I love what Thandie Newton's doing here. I love the fact that, she just is a force of just kind of reckoning, and she does so much good material in this fourth episode, just the limited amount of time we see her. But she bleeds into another character, which I'll talk about in a second. But there's some intrigue to what exactly William's doing. Why is he doing what he's doing? She is very intrigued by what he's doing, because she's not even entirely sure what he's doing. So there's definitely an end game, which makes me wonder if the William Ed Harris character is going to make it through this entire season, because he is now the official big baddie of this episode. Even though he was kind of never really a good character, he is kind of the official big baddie, at least at the moment. So I'm really intrigued to see kind of where that's going to fold out. Once again, I'll talk about it in a second, but there's another character she finally gets back involved with that she of course was involved with in the third season. But then we have Caleb, who of course is Aaron Paul's character, and Caleb somehow survived the third season, which was, I wasn't expecting that have that happen. But because this takes place 8 years later, Caleb is now working on a tower of some sort. He's working a normal job. The riots and stuff like that kind of made everything go back to status quo, made everything kind of ease into a normal situational life and stuff like that. There's still technology, there's still flying cars and stuff like that. But Caleb now has a daughter named Frankie. He has a wife who's played by Aurora Perrineau, of course, who is Carol Perrineau's daughter. I didn't realize she was acting, but she's now playing the wife of course, Aaron Paul's character. And there is some friction there. Aaron Paul's Caleb is still having PTSD problems, the wars and the riots that happened 8 years prior. He's an individual that has grown a gigantic beard, and he is just, he's disconnected from the world, but he still loves his daughter, he still loves his wife, but he's an individual that just, he's hearing things outside his window. He is individual on the edge all the time. He doesn't ever seem to relax. Even his wife is just trying to calm him down and trying to get him to just realize that he has everything in front of him, but it doesn't seem to, what I would call, last, because in the end, William is once again sent somebody to go after him because, of course, Caleb and Maeve and of course, Dolores caused a lot of problems, of course, for the William character. So he's using him for some particular purpose, whether to kill him or to use them to a quest of some sort that they don't realize they're on. But there is a kind of moving factor that is really interesting. But he does send a android, a bad guy, to go after him, a hitman of sorts, I guess you could say. And of course, Maeve ends up killing this bad guy, because what ends up happening is Frankie hears a noise outside the window, sees it's a raccoon, which is a kind of running thing in this first episode, and she drops the bear. She goes out, sees the guy. The guy wonders where Caleb is at, tries to kill both of them, and then of course Maeve chops off the head and kills the guy and stuff like that. And it basically leads to Caleb, in essence, going back to work with Maeve to figure out this kind of ultimate mystery. So he brings in his own people to watch over his family. He goes with Maeve, and they're going to go after a senator, which is what William is in trying to go after himself, of California, or Nevada or whatever it is. It's interesting because Caleb is an individual that seems to be having some issues, struggling with the fact of, how wartime affects you and stuff like that. But he finds himself kind of, as they say, like The Godfather, as I try to get out, they pull me back in. And that's exactly what's happened here. And you can see that his wife is not happy about it. And she knows that, this was going to come around at some point. It never hides itself and never, falls into obscurity. And the two, Maeve and of course Caleb, go off and to figure out this mystery, and that's kind of these three overarching stories have to do with William's character. Why is William doing this? Why is he doing that? What exactly is happening? It's just interesting to watch the story play out, I guess you could say, and what exactly is that mystery, and what exactly is William doing. And I like the fact that in the first episode we're getting just enough that we're getting the setup, but we're not getting everything we need. So it does seem frustrating a little bit, but if as long as Lisa Joy and Jonathan Nolan and all the writers and all the directors have a clear path on what they want, these stories that seem kind of disconnected and kind of problematic at the moment will work itself out. Unfortunately, season 3 showed us that, if they get a little too ambitious, that it becomes a problem. So I'm hoping they've wrangled it in a little bit here. And I'm hoping the stuff that I'll talk about in a second with Cristina really kind of goes into the theories, which I'll talk about at the end of this, my spoiler discussion of this episode. So now, with that said, the majority of this episode deals with Cristina, which I thought was Dolores, but it is Cristina, once again played by Evan Rachel Wood. What exactly her character has to do with Dolores is not entirely sure. I know the whole Dolores thing felt kind of wrapped up after the third season with her dying and stuff like that. But with those servers in the Hoover Dam and everything that's talked about there, and the idea of just like Christina's character who works for a video game company called Olympiad, which I'm sure is going to come into the mix a little later on in the season. The idea of her being a video game writer and storyteller is not really that shocking, to be fairly honest. It's interesting. I think the grasp on video games and TV, especially people who probably don't play a lot of video games, is what it is. I guess you could consider Westworld a video game of sorts if you want. So it doesn't really bother me. It's actually interesting how we have individuals that go into a building, a workplace, and they have these like big cool monitor, like glass pane things. There's a lot of glass in this movie, in this season, with like their phones and stuff like that. But it's this big glass thing that creates a 3D image, and they're able to on the fly create their story and create how it wants and how it's going to affect into the world that they're trying to create for a game. But the thing she's creating, the storytelling that she wants to tell is like a romantic one where it has a happy ending, where it has an individual that's very sad and is going to find their way out, and it deals with a character that looks very much like Dolores, and the father is in a wheelchair, which I believe was in the third season, with her father who was in a wheelchair and stuff like that. That stuff is interesting to me because it also deals with like toxic workplaces with her boss and stuff like that, how her boss was like very against what she was doing. It didn't feel like it was like selling. It's very much a look into the world of video game culture when it comes to creating video games, because they want violence, they want death, they want guns and runs and shooting and stuff like that. They don't want romance and stuff like that, which is very much a true thing, because if you look at like a lot of the video games that come out these days, there's like a lot of Call of Duties and Fortnites and stuff like that, very bloody affairs, or very just like run and gun affairs and stuff like that. So I thought that was very intriguing. It does delve deep a little more than most shows or movies will ever do when it comes to video games. You look at the Matrix Resurrections and that video game stuff, it was really stupid, but here it's really interesting to see that I think there is something there with what she's trying to create and what she's trying to do that really is going to affect how the season plays out. So I'm really intrigued like how that's going to kind of work its way out into kind of the ecosystem that is being portrayed. But she's also getting calls from some person named Peter, who is a stalker of sorts. He keeps like accusing her of changing the story, of affecting his life. Why is she doing that? What is she doing? How is that, like, what is it playing out? It's like a thing that's a running theme or running thread throughout this entire episode. But she also has a friend who's played by Oscar winner Ariana DeBose, who of course is fantastic in West Side Story, who just kind of is in this episode a little bit. She is more of just the friend who's trying to get Cristina to just go out and kind of relax, and it's very kind of part of storytelling elements, I guess you could say. It doesn't really what I would call really add anything to the episode. It may kind of deter from what the episode's trying to do, but it is fun to see Ariana DeBose. She is fun in the episode. She is individual, does give a little bit of life to Evan Rachel Wood's very dour character of Cristina. She's kind of being put down and stuff like that, and then she has a stalker on top of that who keeps calling her. And after a date she goes on, she of course walks home and she's actually confronted by Peter, who actually pulls a knife on her and cuts her and stuff like that, her hand and whatnot. And it's just a guy that is just like, why are you doing this to me? How do you know all this about me? Why don't you leave us alone? What exactly is going on there? Nobody knows, because it's not really revealed very much. It's just like this ultimate mystery of like, what is going on with Cristina's character? How is it affecting the people in the world? Once again, the Auguries has something kind of to deal with that, with a little bit of like the ecosystem control and stuff like that. The introducing people into a world that kind of introducing creatures or characters or anything, I guess you could say, into a world that is not used to having these characters, and how that affects the world. So does that mean that Peter somehow is either a figment of imagination because he keeps disappearing? Is it someone that is like, similar to like Stranger Than Fiction, where she's like writing his narrative, all that good stuff, because there are things she talks about that is very similar to what Peter's talking about. But before she's truly attacked, outside of, getting her arm cut and stuff like that, somebody actually helps her get out of the way, like helps her, by, attacking Peter. But when she looks back up after she's like, looked around, there's no one there. So what does that mean? So next day, when she goes back to work, where she tries to go back to work, Peter is on the roof, calls her, he commits suicide. But the funny thing about this episode that really is intriguing is there's a lot of moments where they cut to black real quick. That is kind of a telling thing, maybe, with the whole cut to black. I don't know. Like, once again, it's a mystery, but it basically ends his character. He's like, I'm gonna, is this how the story's being written, stuff like that. And like I said, he commits suicide. And there are a couple moments in this episode where the Ariana DeBose character talks to her and kind of, ask her if she's doing all right. But there's never a moment where she asks if she's doing all right. With a guy who just committed suicide, you think, there would be some kind of, are you all right? Go see a doctor. But that doesn't happen, because at the end of this episode, now let me say this one thing. New York City, very futuristic in this episode, flying cars and stuff like that. But there's a point where they show old New York, or the current New York, with like the, the World Trade Center, One World Trade Center, stuff like that. But they don't show like the vastness that, the New York City has become, which I think is very interesting, maybe kind of fluctuation, kind of interesting dichotomy of looking at different worlds and stuff like that. But in the end, she decides she's going to put on her earpiece. She's going to, write the story she wants to write, but she changes her mind. And then the big reveal happens, which, like I said, I'm going to talk about my theory in a second. But the big reveal happens is we see a guy on the ground. He comes out of the shadows, and of course we do the slow pan around, and we realize this Teddy, the James Marsden character, which he was already talked about, that could be coming back for this season. Which I was really confused about how they're going to do that, because of the fact that he's dead. But he comes back, and that is the kind of end of the episode. But that leads into my theories of this episode, which I think this episode could go one of two ways. I think William and the server farm may have something to do with, maybe Caleb actually is dead, maybe Maeve is actually dead, maybe Dolores, Cristina, whatever, is actually dead, and they're living in a simulated world, but they're causing problems in the simulated world. And maybe maybe everything's happening for real, and he needs to stop all these people from really causing a lot of problems, because if Cristina remembers everything that Dolores remembers, and of course we have Maeve, which is causing problems, which is maybe what William's trying to do, is get rid of these individuals and know a lot about what he's trying to do. It really leads into some interesting theories and ideas about what is real, what is not, which is what Westworld has always done, with the ideas of like what exactly is happening, how much of this is like a real thing, how much is this a digital thing. The idea that we saw in, I think, one of the season finales, where all these characters move into like a digital reality, into a digital world, which led into like the computer simulation problem, stuff like that. That's kind of where I leave at in my theory at the moment. Is I think honestly it's a digital program. I think it's something that maybe somebody we haven't seen yet is controlling. Maybe William is dead. I don't know. But like I said, this episode has jumped 8 years since the third season, so could be a lot of things we're going to learn about those 8 years. And I think it's going to do a very simulated, as it's always done, type of thing, because once again, you look at the world that is New York City in this episode, and it's very, like I said, it's very open, sprawling, very futuristic. But there's that one scene where it shows the One World Trade Center. It shows everything, you know, it shows like the Manhattan stuff like that, and the, you know, the financial district. And I'm sitting here going, really strange. Why would they show that? Like, why wouldn't they show like the whole city again? And maybe it's just the beauty nature of them wanting to show one World Trade Center. I don't know, but there's also stuff that, you know, deals with Caleb and his conspiracy theories and stuff like that, which I thought was kind of interesting. But to kind of conclude this review, overall, I really enjoyed it. It has good setup. It is definitely what Westworld does best, which is have great season premieres. Where it's going to go from here, I don't know. Hopefully it continues its trend upwards instead of downwards like season 3 ended up happening. I think there's some interesting ideas and concepts. My theory will definitely change as it goes along, which will probably be 100% wrong, which I figure out, you know, it's, you know, first starting theories and stuff like that. So with that said, overall, really enjoyed it. I will give it a 9 out of 10. I think there's some problems when it comes to, you know, them being too obtuse and too mystery-fied, I guess you could say, when it comes to the ideas and stuff like that. But I think overall, it's a strong start. It's probably my favorite season premiere since season 2, maybe season 1 when it officially started. Season 3, this actually tops over season 3 because it's much more pulled back and reserved than what season 3 I felt. So with that said, I feel like a strong start. So 9 out of 10. Anyways, with that said, that'll do it. That'll be my take on Westworld Season 4, Episode 1, which is the Auguries. But in the comments below, let me know what you think of the episode. What is your theory about what's going on? What do you think is the ultimate end to the mystery? All that good stuff. Anyways, if you like what you see on this channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. And with that said, we'll see you on Episode 2 of Season 4 of Westworld. Peace out, guys.